Today, I'm going to be talking about how Orbán is basically messing with the Ukrainian aid just due to him waiting for Trump to get elected. Well, if he gets elected, of course. And today, I have an article from Politico titled Orbán Threatens to Mess with Ukrainian Aid to Help Trump, released on 10/14/24. Now, I'm going to break this down into a few sections so that way you guys can have a better understanding, and that way you can see why I am publishing this video to explain why I personally view Viktor Orbán as a realistic leader, especially nowadays in either both NATO, the EU, and just basically in Europe and perhaps maybe in the world. One of the best. There's also FICO too, but I digress. So, the first area we're going to talk about is the context for why Orbán has made this decision. So, the first section of that is going to be the timing. Because the reason why he has announced it in this month of October is because he is trying to realign and trying to see if the dynamics is going to change in the European Union regarding for the support of Kiev, especially if, again, Trump is the one that takes the lead in winning this upcoming November 2024 election here in America. The second area within that is going to be the domestic pressures. Now, you also got to understand in Hungary, there's a lot of parties because it is a parliamentary party system. You have the left, center, and the right. Now, basically, Hungary itself is also approaching its own elections. And you're having Orbán face a lot of pressure from the right-wing factions, to put it politely, within either his party or other, as they would say, nationalist groups that oppose the continued support for Ukraine, which is realistically sensible as, again, those parties want to focus internally, not externally, in terms of the foreign policies, which, again, indicates why I believe Hungary and Slovakia are leading the charge in prioritizing themselves and not other countries where you can gamble to see who wins or not. And for the premise of protecting European security, when that whole premise is the thing that actually caused the Ukrainian conflict to begin with, literally 10 or 11 years ago, if you want to be specific on the dates. All right, moving on to the second area. So, this particular area is going to be how Orbán is critiquing Ukraine's own government. Now, there's going to be, again, two breaks within this to elaborate. So, we have the political rhetoric. And Orbán here is basically publicly criticizing Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky by stating that his administration's actions is basically detrimental to Hungarians' own interest and regional stability, as I covered in a video a few months ago about how basically Ukraine is blocking the gas and oil pipelines that go through Ukraine that goes to Hungary. So you can see there's a little bit of tampering going on that. To move on to the second part of this, basically, the ethnic Hungarians' rights, as we have been seeing in other multiple videos of Ukrainian officers abducting people off the street. Primarily, they've been targeting other ethnic groups before they start, targeting their own for realistic and military reasons. So, to elaborate on that, first, if Ukraine was going to take its own, hardcore, Ukrainian nationals that actually have this concept of we identify as Ukrainian separate from Russian or Belarus, even though I think they're all one and the same, but I digress. What they will do is they will avoid targeting those that believe that they are their own separate group. Because if they started to take those, then those groups are going to start criticizing the government and causing internal strife in this current situation that Ukrainian army is facing basically the Russian forces in southeastern Ukraine. Now, back to what I'm saying here. Basically, that they're targeting these other ethnic minority groups, whether it be Romanian, Hungarian, and maybe Gypsies. I'm not sure on that part, but definitely those two. And particularly, they've been targeting an area in Ukraine that has been historically part of Hungary called the Transcarpathia area. And they've been basically abducting a lot of Hungarians there, as Russians have actually captured some of them and have asked them, hey, what are you doing here? And they just been saying, well, we've been abducted on streets and forced to conscript and to go fight against you guys. So there is that to contend with, and it is a horrific thing. And I think, as they proclaim to be a democracy, that you would think stop forcing people to go, right? You would want them to vote and have fair representations, freedom and liberty and etc., which again is a mockery of the concept of representation, democracy, and freedom/liberty. So, moving on to the third area of breaking down this article for you guys, and that's going to be the geopolitical implications here. So, the first is going to be the impact on the NATO unity. Now, with Orbán literally halting the aid to Ukraine, NATO's stability and solidarity within the member states is going to be very difficult in terms of presenting to the world that they're united, when I've been very objective that they're not, because you have, again, Slovakia and Hungary not going along with this crazy endeavor in Ukraine. And one could also argue with Turkey, maybe the Croatian president, as he also has stated some things too, but that would require more research and to dig in more on why maybe they're playing that duality game. But primarily in this situation, it's going to be Hungary and Slovakia that are the ones causing people in the EU and NATO in this particular part of the video that there is a significant solidarity problem that I don't think they're going to be able to solve, as this whole conflict has basically created a rift for those who are actually seeking for peace and for understanding Russia's grievances. And again, to be fair here, also understanding Ukraine's grievances rather than just siding with one and ignoring the other, and obviously causing the horrific conflict that we're seeing. Now, the other influential section here is going to be the Russian influence. Basically, by halting aid, Orbán appears to be playing into the hands of Russia, though depends, because Hungary already has a lot of investments also in Russia through, again, the gas and oil pipelines that go from Russia through Ukraine and then from Ukraine to Hungary. So they want to maintain that rather than shooting themselves in the foot by basically sanctioning and doing all that nonsense. So, which is again proving my point why a lot of EU and NATO member states are looking at Hungary as, you could argue, a rogue state in this particular situation by not helping Ukraine, providing, arguments to not give aid to them. And you could maybe even argue playing this duality game of, well, we might support you, well, we won't. Maybe we might sprinkle a little bit aid here and there, but it's not really going to help you. And also, we're waiting to see what happens with the election in America, because that is, again, a major factor in the geopolitical sphere, as, again, America is the one that's leading the international world-based order, which is, I dare say, kind of cracking and maybe falling apart soon, maybe in a decade. Who knows, right? We'll see. All right, so the fourth area. Basically, this is going to cover Orbán's relationship with Donald Trump. So he, right here in the first section, is going to make some strategic calculations. Orbán is basically making a decision to align with the former US President Donald Trump, who has been critical of continued American support for Ukraine and still continues to do that, as he's been talking about that in the last few weeks on YouTube podcasts. And basically, what Orbán is trying to do is to secure Hungary's position for potential future political realignments, though there is also the contention with NATO basically putting policies in place to prevent Trump from tweaking some things, or maybe even just preventing some other aids or restrictions or military aid to Ukraine in helping them, of course. The other is going to be the diplomatic repercussions here. So basically, the consequences if Orbán or Hungary continues to adopt Trump-like rhetorics, in particularly regarding its standing within the EU and the US, and even NATO, this might prove a situation where basically the EU and America, depends who wins this upcoming November, just to be clear with you guys, it might either make them in a very, very good position or it might put them in a position where they're going to be seen as a rogue state, like North Korea, for example, and for some people proclaiming Russia to be one, which I highly doubt. But hey, again, everyone has their own opinions. I'm not stopping you if you believe that. Have at it. We could definitely discuss that in the comments. Now, the last or second last section is going to be covering the public opinion in Hungary regarding, Orban cutting the aid. So you have two sections again right here that I want to break down. You have nationalist sentiment. Basically, Orban is catering to the nationalists within Hungary, basically to make them understand, yeah, we should prioritize our own country. Surprisingly, the Hungarian nationalists are in agreement because basically what happened, what I told you earlier, a little bit further up in one of the points about how Zelensky's government is basically picking up minorities, and particularly the Hungarians in that particular region of Ukraine, which again is going to further the national sentiment that Ukraine is not in the best interest to invest for Hungary, and they would be correct on that. As again, many are feeling the fatigue of this ongoing conflict and are basically being more skeptical of the EU's aid policies and money loans and donations to Ukraine, as one would ask if I was a EU citizen, why is my tax dollars going there? Shouldn't we prioritize in my own nation state or country rather than some other place? But then again, the elites or political actors within the EU have their own agenda and have their own worries to contend with, i.e., if, let's say, for example, Russia wins, well, then the EU will be panicking, and so would NATO, because their image would be shattered as this protector and liberator for freedom and democracy and, blah, 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 all that other stuff, which I view as BS, but whatever. Now, the last section, basically what it's going to come down to in that article is basically the future prospects for Hungary. So, what are going to be the next steps for Hungary? Well, looking ahead, these decisions to halt aid raises questions about Hungary's role within both the EU and NATO. It also may lead to further, dare I say, isolation and prompt of realignments within the countries that share similar views on Ukraine and, dare I say, on their own freedoms and beliefs. So, what is going to definitely be the long term strategy here? Well, basically, Orban's long term strategy may involve recalibrating Hungary's foreign policy to prioritizing regional alliances over broader Western unity, potentially signaling a shift in Hungary's historical position within the EU and NATO, which is good because that's also going to provide more individuality within the EU and NATO countries rather than, falling in line to whatever they quote unquote agree upon as a organization, which think they're not really in line, but they kind of have to go with it just because of other political pressures, whether they also be on secrets not being revealed or other current backdoor dealings with money and all that. Just again, in my personal opinion here. So to basically summarize my thoughts on all this, or just perhaps conclude, I think Hungary might be taking a gamble that me personally, looking at the US election, might not be the correct path. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, wait, why are you supporting Hungary for doing this if you believe that he is making a mistake? I still think it's the right path to go, but I'm more, I won't say pessimistic, more realistic on what is going to happen literally next month here in America in the election, of course. And I probably will conclude I think Orban miscalculated on his gamble. Then again, look, if I'm wrong and let's say Trump wins, perfect. Great. Then he made the correct calculations. But just with my personal view and sort of talking with people, I have basically concluded what might go down in the election. Of course, not saying again I'm going to be voting. I'm not, because I have my own views on that, and I want to be very clear. I'm more neutral on who is going to win, but I'm also realistic on the prospects of, okay, I can see why this person's going to win, and I can see why that person's going to win, and strategies and tactics, etc. But I do agree that what Viktor Orban and Fico are doing is definitely the correct direction that I think a lot of European countries need to do rather than being blinded by their superiority complex and having no repercussions for the actions they have done over the years. Other than that, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And yeah, I look forward to posting another video for you guys. And just again, thank you for your time.